I'm reminded of the messaging for the National Comedy Center in Jamestown, which talks about the healing power of laughter. So boy, do we need this episode now. Tell us how, this is an episode of Will and Grace. They're paying tribute to your parents' show, I Love Lucy. How did you get involved? And just fill us in on that.
Well, I have a new, good, great friend named Robert Greenblatt, who was head of NBC for quite a while. Now is over at Time Warner, HBO, all that stuff. But he called me and he said, even though I'm not involved in NBC anymore, Will and Grace is like my baby. And the producers are talking about doing a tribute show for one of their very last shows of their very last season. And they want to tribute I Love Lucy. And they would like your permission and also CBS's permission to take the actual scripts and portray Lucy, Ricky, Fred, and Ethel in various parts. And what would you think about that? And they don't want to do it unless you think it's a good idea. And I thought it was wonderful. I love that show. I love Will and Grace. I love those four guys. They have always kind of tributed the show. The writers, the producers have always tipped their hat a little bit to great comedy writers. And certainly I Love Lucy had some of the great comedy writers of all time. And some of their sequences, some of their storylines harken back to a few of those shows. So I spoke to CBS and I got them involved, and they immediately said yes, that they would love to do that, which I thought was pretty cool. NBC, CBS, they went, yeah, great, take our show, do this. And then Max, one of the producers, asked me if I would consider doing a little cameo on the show. And I have never, ever, ever done anything like that. I sort of pride myself on going, no, I don't go back and do I Love Lucy stuff. I don't do my mother. I run the estates, Desilu too, and that's enough already. And I did a documentary, and that's about as far as I want to go. But when he told me what it was, and then when I read the script for the show, and it's so damn clever, I thought, I have to do this. It's too fun. It's just too much damn fun. And so I did a little cameo in the show, which I think you'll find amusing, in the Chocolate Factory episode, the Candy Factory episode. And it took a while, to have them decide how they were going to do it, how they were going to use the script, and who was going to play what, and which shows they were going to use. Because FYI, these are the actual I Love Lucy scripts. These are not Will and Grace send up of those storylines. These are the actual scripts, but they have fun by switching who plays who. And
it's a lot of fun.
Unbelievable the way that it's being done. So true. The backstage people are the ones that really blew my mind. They really took it dead serious. The prop people, the set people, costumes, makeup, the hair, the wigs, to do it for real and not do it as a send up. You know what I mean? You walk on the set and go, my God, that's the actual set. And the conveyor belt with the chocolates, with real chocolates. And they took each grape off the vine on the bunch to put into the vat, real grapes. What? Hello? You could have used rubber grapes. Who would know? It was insane to me. I had such deep respect for their crew. Really.
Yeah, that attention to detail. And I'm sort of mindful, first of all, on TV now, there are so few three-camera comedies anymore. Will and Grace is one of them. And that live audience, playing to the live audience. And watching it, I think about your father, Desi, who pioneers this technique. I mean, people don't realize without him, we wouldn't have Will and Grace, Big Bang, all these shows we love filmed in front of a live audience. And that's something your father came up with to match your mother's talent. The need of performing in front of a live audience like she'd done on radio, but filming it. It's extraordinary what he did.
Well, they say necessity is the cause of invention. And the short version of that story is that they were going to be in this show together. CBS agreed he would play the husband. They would do this show. And then they lived in California in a little ranch in Chatsworth, and they got a call saying, when are you all coming to New York to film the show, to tape the show? And he said, what do you mean, New York? We're going to be here. We're going to be here in California. We're trying to start a family. It's the whole point of being together. We have our house here. No. You have to come here, because if we do it California, you have to just tape the monitors, and then all we get is a thing called kinescope in those days. It was very bad quality. And he said, we need her to come to New York, and then the quality will be better. Apparently they didn't care what it looked like for the people in California, but all the people in New York had to see good stuff. And he said, well, no, we don't want to do that. Why don't we just film it? We'll film it out here. He said, no, you can't film it because it has to be in front of a live audience, because Lucie works much better in front of a live audience. We want her in front of people. Okay. He said, well, then let's film it in front of a live audience. He said, no, you can't do that. You can't bring a live audience into a film studio. They don't do that. Why not? Because they don't do that. Can't do that. And to his credit, what he should be credited for is that he kept saying, why not? I don't understand. Why not? Why can't you do that? And eventually figured out how to do it, how to hire the right people to figure out the lighting, and how to talk to the fire department about how they could build bleachers, and they had to put in bathrooms, and they had to have the people wait on a line outside the studio, and then they had to get permission from all the neighbors that there would be a line outside the studio. If you've never read his book called A Book by Lucie Arnaz, cleverly entitled, it explains this in fabulously funny and specific, my husband will get that, detail about how they actually accomplished this. And eventually, without knowing it, created the 3-camera live audience film technique, which is still
and the other, his belief in this and in your mother begat the ownership, because my understanding is that at some point the pilot, which I believe you feature in, so it's uncredited cameo.
She was pregnant with me when they did the pilot. That's right. And several years later, they wanted to get bigger because they had their little company and they were making other shows, but Desilu Productions were making other little pilots, but when they would take them to the big studios, they couldn't compete. This story is also in his book. He tells it way better than I do. They couldn't compete with the bigger studios because they had a much bigger machine to be selling with. Right. And so we said, if we want to, we either got to quit or we got to get bigger. And she didn't want to quit. So they sold their rights to buy a studio. They sold their rights back to CBS. I think what you're talking about is when he said he wanted to own the tapes, right? He wanted to own.
Right. Yeah.
That is because they got halfway through this, and when they finally figured out how they were going to do a film live audience, technique, it was going to be about, I think it was $5,000 more than what the budget was set for. And in those days, that was a lot of money extra. And so CBS said, well, we're not going to pay that extra $5,000. And the sponsors said, we're not going to pay it. So my dad said, all right, well, Lucie and I will put up half and half of our salary and we'll pay that extra. But if we do that, we want to own the films. And CBS went, yeah, fine, whatever. Like, what would we need these stupid films for? So they did have ownership of the films until they sold CBS back. I mean, they sold I Love Lucie back to CBS in the late 50s to buy the studio. Yeah.
To buy the studio, that, by the way, that they met in.
They met, exactly. RKO, that's where they were. That's where their studios were. And they sold it back and ended up buying the whole shebang.
Yeah. So when you're there, I mean, it must have been incredibly emotional on the set of Will and Grace, seeing the loving tribute, and as you said, the words that your parents had said, along with Vivian and Bill Frawley, and just take the emotion sitting there, because what's wonderful at the end of the episode is there's little shots behind the scenes, and there's this one wonderful shot of you sitting in the audience watching.
Oh. I didn't know that. I was sitting next to Jim Burrows through most of the taping on Friday, and not on the day that I filmed. I wasn't out there, but I came over on the Friday night before just to watch how they do it, get a sense of it, so I wouldn't feel so out of place. And then Monday I came and filmed my little part, and I was in costumes and wigs and makeup all day, so I couldn't really go out by the audience. But it was interesting to sit and watch how they do it. And it's different. It was a little bit different than the way that we used to do our show. With I Love Lucie was filmed, the live audience, and then the Lucie show was filmed that way. The Here's Lucie show that I was on was filmed exactly the same way. And we did it more like a play. I mean, when the audience came in, they saw the show once. That was it. I mean, we didn't do retakes. Unless somebody fell down or a tree fell on them, we did not go back and do stuff again. They did all those little tweaks during the week. And Jim Burrows reminded me that probably that was because in those days it was film. It was expensive, right? And now we have digital, which is a good thing. Maybe not such a good thing because it allows people to keep changing their mind and adding things because film didn't cost anything now, right? You can just keep filming, it doesn't cost anything. But I think my father and my mother would not have done it that way, even if they could have digital, because they always had a thing about the audience. They wanted their audience to be entertained. Like to them, it was a show. Like they came from, my father was a showman, right? He did concerts and stuff. So that audience, we had a band that entertained them before the show. And he did a warm up. And we only took the amount of time in between scenes that it would actually take to change costumes and wigs and stuff like that. We hurried up. And I mean, we started filming at maybe 6 o'clock. We were at a restaurant having dinner by 9:30, and we rehearsed all week long. Many times. Everybody knew their lines, and the writers kept tweaking and tweaking. But we didn't do it over and over and over again, which they tend to do in shows like that. Not just Will and Grace, but a lot of the shows today, the audience sits there for a long time, They watch it.
Certainly. I mean, you sort of did a little apprenticeship on your mother's second show, the Lucy show, where you Cynthia. Then she comes to you and your brother.
Paul, my God.
She comes to you and your brother, and you decide, you say you'll do a Here's Lucy with her. And my gosh, some of those episodes, I mean, it's like a little mini musical every week. And you're telling me you guys rehearse all week and you film all that in 2 or 3 hours. That's extraordinary.
It's amazing. It was amazing, especially
what I love.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, what I was going to say is I know that your mother stayed friends with Vivian Vance, and she's kind of the reason that Vivian Vance is the reason you have the career you've had, I think, in a way, isn't it?
Yeah. Viv used to come and guest star on the Here's Lucy show at least once a year. And she knew that when I was in grammar school and in high school that I just loved doing plays and musicals. And I would, jump up on a box and lip sync to Oklahoma. And she asked me one time, what are you doing on your hiatus when you're not doing this show? What do you do? And I said, we go to Hawaii and sometimes we go to Mexico. And she said, wait a minute, stop. You're not going to spend the rest of your life stuck on a television series, are you? What? Like stuck on a television? And then I got what she meant. She said, you don't want to get typecast in one role for the rest of your life and never be able to go back to what you really love doing, which is the theater. I really took that to heart because I started thinking, when they found Vivian, she was doing legit stage shows. And now she's Ethel Mertz for the rest of her life. And you can't go back and just do, Who's Afraid of Virginia Woolf and be taken seriously anymore. It's too much. It's too different. So she said, be careful. Don't let that happen to you. When you have a chance, you get back to the theater. And I immediately started auditioning for summer stock and regional theater and got a national tour. And 3 years later, I was on Broadway playing our song, and it just went on and on like that. So thank God she said that.
And went on and on, including sort of leading to you meeting your husband of almost 40 years. 40 years this June, yeah. And I love, and the Neil Simon connection, because he writes the book for They're Playing Our Song. And tell us about the Neil Simon connection between you and your husband and how you sort of honored that. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Well, I met him in September of 1979, and Larry was on Broadway at the time in Neil Simon's straight play Chapter 2. And I was in Neil's musical, They're Playing Our Song, with Robert Klein. And I met Larry in between shows one afternoon at Joe Allen Restaurant. And we hit it off right away, but he was going through a really sad, terrifying divorce with his 2 children, 2 young boys. So I kind of went, I don't think I'm going to get involved in this right now because I know what rebound relationships are like. I had just been through one. But eventually we started dating about 3 months later. we stayed friends, and I invited him to do stuff with us in the theater groups I had. But then we started dating for real, and it went pretty quick. And I had a son with Larry, and we named him Simon Luckenbill. Yeah.
I love that. And I love that you also, when you had a daughter, named her Catherine, partly because I think you admired Katharine Hepburn.
Exactly.
And I'm reminded of the title of one of her films, Keeper of the Flame. And that's what I think you've been since your parents' passing. And I don't think people fully appreciate the amount of work it is for you and keeping the integrity of their legacy. And just talk a little bit about that, because I think it's sort of unexpected amount of work.
Yeah, well, it was unexpected. I have my own life, my own family, 5 kids, a husband, and a whole career, right? And it's enough. And then when my mom passed away, my brother and I unwittingly inherit all the questions and all of the pirating of merchandise with their pictures on it, and eventually we decided that it was easier, cheaper, more, reasonable to actually create some sort of a business out of it so that we could afford to say no and hire the lawyers, right? So we started Desilu 2, Desilu, TOO, and it runs the estates of my mom and my dad. But now, 30 some years later, it's become quite a wonderful thing. It really it's a brand all of its own. It started out with us just trying to say, oh, really? Bobblehead dolls? No, get them out of here. Or who stole her picture and put it on that sheet? But now we really think about what that show and mom and my father really mean to the planet, and what that kind of, like you said before, unconditional love and laughter, the healing power of that, and how we need it today more than ever, the kindness, the friendship that it represents. That brand is incredibly valuable. And it harkens back to a time when it was simpler. And maybe we didn't have all the conveniences of us being able to do this with, the internet is a magnificent friend, but it was a simpler time. And it's good to remember those times and to think about what those writers on I Love Lucy, and I always attribute the writers like my mom did, what they wrote about was friendship, and what they wrote about was unconditional love. And I always say to people, you could almost have called that show I Love Lucy Anyway, because it was about somebody getting in a fix, getting in trouble and somehow getting out of it. And you can relate to that. Like, oh, I screwed up again, and are they still going to love me? Yeah, they do. Oh, isn't that nice? And that's why I think, yes, it's funny. And God knows the healing power of actually laughing, belly laughing is so healthy for you. But it's Absolutely. The love. It's the love and the laughter together that has really kept it alive for almost 70 years, And
I think about when your parents mid-50s, and in fact, they make a point in their acceptance speech of asking the TV Academy to have a category for writers.
Yes.
That writers, they hadn't been.
Amazing. That's why so many people, I think just the mindset, that people are actually saying, that why isn't there a category for writers? In a way, it was a good thing that people forgot that was written. Like this day, they'd say, your mother was so funny, she made up that stuff. But she didn't make it up. I mean, brilliant people wrote this. And so well thought out. There's a point to it, yeah.
Well, the TV Academy, in a way, makes it up to them by introducing the category. But then I Love Lucy is the only show that's in the TV Hall of Fame. It happens in 1990, the same year they induct your father. And that's a big year, because that's also the year that you win your own Emmy Award.
I think I think we won it. Okay. Yeah.
Oh, okay. You can't always believe IMDb. But what I do believe the competition. So this is when you make the documentary about your parents using a lot of books in the home movies. And your competition includes Katharine Hepburn for her little video memoir all about me, Oprah interviewing Michael Jackson,
right?
A Barbara Walters special,
yeah.
and a documentary about D.W. Griffith, who founded Hollywood. So, I mean, and you produced it.
What was very cool about that, and I don't spend much time tooting horns about winning that award, but I have to tell you, there was something that was so cool that year. That was the year that they decided, we're going to do it differently now. We're going to have the 5, things that are up, and we're going to have people come into an auditorium, and they're going to watch it, and we're not going to have, like the award goes to. We're going to have this. If you think it's worthy of an Emmy, you put worthy of an Emmy. And if you don't, you don't. And the ones that get up to a certain amount of votes, they all get Emmys. And the ones that if they don't make that many votes, they don't get an Emmy. And we said, well, what happens if nobody gets enough votes? They go, then nobody gets an Emmy. Well, what happens if everybody gets an Emmy? Really? I thought, well, that's bizarre. And so we were the only people to win. So that even made it more incredible. Like, what? I really thought that was amazing. And it was not, as I said in my acceptance speech, trying to quote Itzhak Rabin, which I still can't say his name right, Itzhak Rabin. I said this was not an easy piece to make because it really wasn't to ride that fine line. So it wasn't a tribute, it wasn't a trash piece. It was just trying to tell the truth, about their lives.
Oh no, it's a wonderful thing, and I think and bringing everything full circle, I believe it aired on NBC.
It did,
and it did, and it's almost 30 years ago. And the wonderful thing about Will and Grace, we're an awards website, and so I know people watching will know this, but Will and Grace is one of only 3 shows that all of the main cast won Emmys. All in the Family, Golden Girls, and Will and Grace. So when you tied your parents' legacy to a show, you picked the right one, I think.
Well, you know what? They have the right amount of heart. Will and Grace has a tremendous heart. And they were pioneers in the type of thing that they were telling a story about. There's the gay couples and stuff. And my mom was married to a Latino. That was like a no. You can't do that. Mixed marriage on television. You couldn't be pregnant on television. There were all these firsts. And Will and Grace had a lot of firsts, too. And it's brilliantly written. It's really well written. It really, really is. I mean, I was honored that they wanted to do that. I'm sure my mother and dad would be thrilled. I'm sure they are thrilled, and they'll be watching on Thursday night with the rest of us.
Yes, that's right. Thursday night.
Thursday, yeah. Sitting by ourselves with our masks and our Purell in our hands, we will be watching this going, thank God there's laughter somewhere.
Exactly. Well, thank you for taking the time, and it was a real treat. And I'm so delighted that you agreed to take part in the show, and I think everyone will be so thrilled with the way they see how it's turned out. It's a wonderful half hour.
Yeah, it was a pleasure to do. I can't wait to see it all put together, really. Honest to God.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks,
Thank you. Bye.